Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you get your questions in and we get our answers back to you. And normally that means that the people who ask the questions benefit, but also so do you listening, because you get to learn alongside those people asking the questions. But of course you may have your own question that you want answering. So let's give you a quick reminder of how you can get involved.
Yep, it all comes down to leaving us a voicemail with your question. It's as simple as that, and we give you two routes into that. You can either give us a call on 013 808 0035, or you can go to propertyhub.net/ask. Either way, the result is the same. You record your question, you re-record it if you need to, that's fine. Then you send it our way, and we give you an answer just like we're about to for Jonathan.
Hi Rob and Rob, love the podcast, and my name's Jonathan and I'm calling from Manchester. And I was just wondering if you guys have read the UK Collaborative Centre for Housing Evidence and their article, Tackling the UK Housing Crisis, Is Supply the Answer? It's written summer last year, and it's just a really interesting sort of journal about whether the supply, that's kind of 300,000 a year, housing supply target is actually the real cause of rising house prices, or if it's actually mostly down to interest rates. I'd just be really interested if you guys had a read through it and just commented your thoughts. Really fascinating and just definitely giving me some food for thought. So yes, that'd be great, and keep up the good work.
Jonathan, I'm glad you brought this up. And actually, this is something that I've changed my mind about over recent years. We did an episode recently on things we've changed our mind about, and this actually should have been on there because when we started the podcast, I completely bought into the idea that the main determinant of house prices was supply and demand. That makes sense, right? That's how most things seem to work. But having learned a lot more about economics in general and the property market in particular over the years, I do think that that's now a simplistic explanation. It's part of it, of course it is, but it's not the whole story. So the general gist of the research that you're talking about and the theory that lies behind it is that there's a distinction between housing services and housing assets. So when you buy a property to live in, you're actually getting two completely separate benefits from it. You've got the house as an asset, but you're also getting services from that house because it's giving you somewhere to live. And if you weren't getting those services from that house, you'd be getting it from some other house that you were renting, for example. And when you're thinking about house prices, you need to separate these out. So if there just weren't enough houses, then you'd have a supply and demand imbalance, right? There'd be more people wanting housing services than there are houses to supply that service. But if that was the case and that was driving house prices going up, then you'd expect the price of rent to be going up, because whether you've got notional rent from a house you own or you're paying actual rent on a property that you're renting from a landlord, it's the same thing. So are rents going up? No, rents have actually fallen slightly over recent years in real terms, whereas house prices keep on going up. You can see the same thing in a slightly different way if you've ever tried to rent out a property, which most people listening to this podcast probably have done. Finding a tenant is not that easy. If the property isn't sufficiently appealing, or if you price the rent just a little bit too high, it takes time to find a tenant. And if there's a genuine shortage of houses, then you'd expect there to be queues around the block every time one becomes available. So if that's not the reason for house prices being where they are, then what is? Well, the answer, according to this research, is that it's to do with housing as an asset. Because remember, as well as the benefit you get from the house from living in it, there's also its value as a financial asset. And for many reasons, there is a lot of demand for financial assets right now. One of those reasons is QE. Effectively, more money has been printed. That money has gone to people, institutions who've sold bonds back to the central bank, and they're left with cash. What do they do with that cash? Well, they buy financial assets with it. And one of those financial assets they could buy is property. And very much linked to that is interest rates. Because interest rates are so low, so the cost of servicing debt against the property is low, the price that you could afford to pay for it goes up. And there's a piece of research from the Bank of England relatively recently that said that basically all house price growth over the last decade could be attributed to the collapse in interest rates rather than any other factors. So does that mean that supply and demand makes no difference at all? No, definitely not. It is a factor. And is the report that you've cited 100% on the money? I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't know enough about this area. But I do think it's really interesting because it challenges the conventional supply and demand view, which is so completely ingrained. So is that an answer, Jonathan? I don't really know, but it gave me a chance to ramble about economics for a bit, which I really enjoyed. And hopefully it's given other listeners a little something to think about as well.
Well, I enjoyed that ramble, Rob, and I'm sure many other people did as well. I think we need to do a podcast on this because I agree that to view price rises on supply and demand alone is too simplistic. But I think people are going too far and almost written off supply and demand as having any impact. So I think it'd be great to get the mics fired up for a special podcast episode on this in the coming months. So listen out for that one. Next up, we've got a question in from Mary.
Hi, Rob and Rob. My name is Mary, and I recently found your podcast, and I'm loving it. And I just wanted to ask a few questions. So my husband and I were looking to buy our first property at the beginning of lockdown, and it's all fallen through due to COVID. And now we're reconsidering everything. So we have a deposit of just over 100,000, and we were going to put it down towards our first home. But now we're thinking about splitting it 2 or even 3 ways and buying a property each potentially, 1 dream home and 2 buy-to-lets. But we're really unsure about the market and if buying a house each would maximise on our first buyer's advantage or would be a tax implication. Any advice would be so beneficial. Thanks.
Mary, I feel a bit guilty here because Rob had a question where he went into a lot of detail, really dug deep, questioned his views and went into a lot of depth. And I'm just going to tell you to go to YouTube because we have done a video on this very subject. And what I'm saying is I've already done the work with Rob on this. We've done a video called How to Invest £100,000. We've also done a video on how to invest £50,000. So check out both of them because both are useful in different ways. There's a lot to consider here, so it needs its own dedicated video. So head over to YouTube, search for Property Hub UK. And clearly, Mary, you've not subscribed, otherwise you wouldn't have asked this question. But I'm not telling you off, I'm just encouraging you to subscribe and make sure you set up the notification so you don't miss videos like this that we're putting out on a regular basis.
So there you go. A bit of an unequal division of labour on this week's Ask Rob and Rob, but that's okay. Maybe it will be put straight next week because we're going to be back to do it all again. And before that, our labour of love that is the Property Podcast. Every single Thursday, this week being no exception. So please tune in for that one. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.